Just in general, what are some positions that you have with regards to writing? What's a craft point you have that other writers might disagree with? What's a craft point you have that maybe even some of your writing teachers don't agree with? I
Mm,
think that's actually one of the things that can be kind of dangerous with even like MFA programs or working through like philanthropy and like academia and like nonprofit and stuff is that I don't know how much it's always pushing you to kind of challenge the norms as much as it adhere to your professors or the people above you to be like, oh well, this one, this poet said this or this poet said this or this poet, or like we're
mm,
going to read this craft essay because this is going to teach us about right versus the MFA program that's like, hey, by the time you finish our program you need to write 3 or 5 original craft essays, with proof to
yeah.
start developing your own kind of writing position and things like that. Like, I think we need to start being able to be like, I myself as a writer, I view this as being essential. I view this as being detrimental to the art.
Yeah. I think about like and kind of pulling it like kind of outside of poetry, just like when you think about if you're talking about like products, like product like companies, like they have like a brand identity, and that allows them to really be able to market out or kind of create their product and or not even I mean in a way kind of create the product. So if you're talking about like something expanding out of your product, you have to check back in with your like ethic, right? You have to check back in like, is this something that I believe in? Is this
Yeah.
something that we
Mm-hmm.
do? And like if you operate kind of linearly from there, then you should be it should make it should reduce like decision fatigue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like you're not having to process like, man, do I do this or do I do this or do I this? Because it's like these decisions are things that you
Yeah.
already made, but it's like those are things that you already really are really intentional about before anything ever starts.
Mm-hmm.
So funny. So on the filmmaking tip, I was invited to come out and not even necessarily participate, but just kind of help out as far as like advice or something and things like that. And I went out to this really dope gallery and they were shooting this short film. And like one of the things that I realized, I was like, okay, well, the things that are happening here, like the interactions that are happening between cast and crew, between like cast and director, between director and main character, and all that other stuff. Like these are all things that if any of these parties were just like before we even work on this project, this is what I think. This is how I believe. This is how I move. This is how I create like my work. And if not everybody is on the same page as that, like if not on that same page, or at the very least if we can't come to it, because even if you don't like, I'm not a person that doesn't believe in like negotiating or doesn't believe in like coming to some kind of medium, but like you come to those mediums before you start, right? Like you're like, let's come to these agreements before like we start getting the ball rolling. Because again, just like we're talking about, like if you're like trying to do the work and now again you're fatigued or you're even like halted by, okay, do I think this? Do I think this is a good idea? Do I think this is a good suggestion? Then things can kind of fall apart. And so like just like when it comes to like how you write or like the direction that you write, maybe it's like, like what you're it kind of goes into like what you're putting into work. It might contribute to what you would add into a collection. It might contribute to, where or what circumstances that you'll perform. Like there's so many things
Yeah.
that, some really deep work and deep thinking and lining out ahead of time will really assist with.
Yeah. I mean, I think an immediate first step you can take is just think about what's a poetry event you wouldn't read at? Who would you say no to? Like
Mm,
in your own city, if someone from your city that you know asked you to perform at an event, who is someone in your city that you would say no to? Because even just that can start, I think, giving you an idea of what your position is. You know, I think I'll tie it to like, for instance, my teaching. So one thing I do, so my teaching business is I teach pronunciation, and the way pronunciation often works is a lot of people are really focused on like, oh, well, you put your tongue here, you do this with your mouth and things like that. And that's kind of, if we kind of do a parallel with kind of just academia and poetry, that's how I taught for a while. 'Cause that's how we were taught, you know? It's like, okay, well, this is how pronunciation is taught, so I'm going to just follow those best practices and carry them on.
Yeah.
But the more I was doing it, the more I was like, the results I'm getting with students, I'm not satisfied with. They're having, they're doing all the things technically correct, but I'm not happy with the quality of the sound. So that means that, what do you do then? Well, then you have to start conducting your own research, start kind of doing your own case studies, start doing your own experimentations, and start trying to find your own unique viewpoints. And that's ultimately led to, I created my own like pronunciation textbook, having a program that's dedicated to other aspects of pronunciation that aren't so heavily focused on the mouth position stuff. I think the same thing is necessary for writing is, you know, it's helpful to understand what the common methodology is. It's helpful for me from a
Yeah.
pronunciation standpoint to understand how the mouth works and what the tongue's doing, what the lips are doing. But then once you have that understanding, at some point, I think we gotta kind of be like, what's my own unique fingerprint that I can leave on this, that
Mm.
that hasn't been brought up before,
Yeah.
you know?
Do, do you feel like that kind of in the same way that that like writing and form kind of eliminates a lot of other possibilities, but because it does that, it makes you kind of like more focused and more laser focused on what you're doing? Do you feel like that quickens the process and quickens the creative process, like even in your teaching, like if you're like building curriculum, building like what you're going to be doing next, like do you feel like that kind of gives you much more of a sharper and quicker focus?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it before. Like, what's the worst thing I think you can do with to like a writer or an artist is just give them a blank piece of paper and say, "Hey, make something." I guess that's horrible. But if you're like, "No, I need you have this many words per line. I need this many lines. It has to rhyme. It has to." That's actually way more liberating.
Yeah.
The word, because it comes down to decision. We have to make decisions. I think one of the things that when people are newer to a craft point, the I think the problem is the options, because there's so many options. What do you
Yeah.
decide to do? Whereas like if we think of like the verb decide, what does decide mean? I mean, if you look at the etymology of decide, it's like it literally means like cutting away. So that fact of narrowing down and honing in, I think is fundamental
Yeah.
to meaningful expression.